The great lecture hall of Station Luminar 9 was filled with creatures from across the galaxy, and the air hummed with the soft sounds of translators working in hundreds of languages at once, creating a gentle buzz that mixed with the excited whispers of scientists who had traveled light years to attend this conference on xenobiology and planetary life. Professor Valentin stood at the center of the enormous stage, his crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls as he moved with the careful grace of someone who knew that every eye in the room was watching him. And he enjoyed this attention very much because he had spent 300 years studying life across the stars, and he believed he understood its limits better than anyone else alive. The audience before him was a beautiful display of galactic diversity, with beings from low-gravity moons floating gently in their seats, aquatic delegates swimming in hovering tanks of water that followed them wherever they went, and gaseous entities contained in special magnetic fields that kept their bodies from drifting apart in the station's artificial atmosphere. "Welcome, honored colleagues," Valentin said, his voice carrying through the translation systems with perfect clarity. "Today I will share with you the final results of my lifetime research into the upper limits of planetary habitability. And I promise you that what I have discovered will change how we think about life in the universe." The audience leaned forward with interest, their various sensory organs focused on the professor as he activated the holographic display behind him, showing a slowly rotating image of a rocky planet with thick atmosphere and harsh conditions. "For centuries, we've asked ourselves a simple question," the professor continued. "What are the limits of life, and where can complex organisms truly survive and thrive in this vast universe of ours?" He gestured dramatically, and the hologram changed to show a graph with numbers and measurements that made several audience members gasp with recognition. "My research has confirmed what many suspected but none had proven until now. And the answer is clear and absolute," Valentin declared with pride in his voice. "Any planetary gravity exceeding 0.6 standard units creates obstacles that no biology can overcome." The room filled with murmurs of agreement from scientists who had long believed this to be true. And Valentin smiled, if a crystalline being could be said to smile, as he continued his lecture with growing confidence. "Consider what gravity does to a living body," he explained. "It pulls on every cell, every organ, every bone structure. And at higher levels, this pulling becomes crushing, destroying the delicate systems that allow complex life to function." He showed images of experiments and calculations, of computer models that demonstrated how bodies would fail under heavy gravity, how hearts would struggle to pump blood upward, how bones would crack and muscles would tear from the constant strain at 0.7 standard gravity. "Most known species begin to show signs of severe stress," the professor said. "At 0.8, only the most robust organisms can function. And at 0.9, we see complete systemic failure in every test subject." The audience nodded along, taking notes on their various devices, agreeing with everything the professor said because it matched their own experiences and beliefs about the nature of life in the cosmos. "And at 1.0 standard gravity?" Valentin asked dramatically, pausing for effect as the room fell silent. "At 1 full standard gravity unit, complex life is simply impossible. Absolutely impossible. Completely and utterly impossible." He said these words with such certainty, such absolute conviction, that no one in the room thought to question him. No known species has ever evolved under such crushing conditions. The professor declared, "The universe has hard limits, my friends, and this is one of them. A wall that life cannot climb. A barrier that biology cannot break." The audience applauded politely, accepting this truth as they accepted all scientific truths, with faith in the research and trust in the researcher who presented it. But then, From the very back row of the enormous lecture hall, a voice spoke up. Calm and clear and completely unafraid. "I have a question, Professor." Every head in the room turned. Every eye and sensor and receptor focused on the figure who had spoken. And what they saw confused many of them because this was a species they did not recognize. A new addition to the galactic community that had only recently been contacted and invited to attend their first interstellar conference. The being was strange to look at. Compact and dense in a way that seemed almost wrong. Moving with a fluid grace that should not have been possible for something so solid and heavy-looking. And when it stood up from its seat, several nearby delegates shifted away instinctively, sensing something dangerous without understanding why. "Yes, what is your question?" Professor Valithan asked, his tone polite but slightly annoyed at the interruption to his carefully planned presentation. The creature, the human, walked down the aisle toward the stage, and those who watched noticed something odd about how it moved. Something that spoke of power and control, and a body built for purposes they could not imagine. "My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez," the human said, her voice carrying easily through the silent hall. "And I represent the species known as humanity from a planet we call Earth." Yes. "Welcome to the conference," Valithan said impatiently. "Now what is your question?" Elena stopped at the front of the room and looked up at the professor with eyes that held no fear, no doubt. Only a calm certainty that made several audience members feel suddenly uncomfortable without knowing why. "Professor, you said that no species can survive at 1.0 standard gravity," Elena said. "But I must tell you that our homeworld, Earth, has a gravity of exactly 1.0 standard units." For a moment, nothing happened. The words hanging in the air like they had not been fully heard or understood. Then Elena smiled slightly and added, "We do not just survive there, Professor, we thrive there. And we have done so for millions of years." The room fell absolutely silent. A silence so complete that you could hear the hum of the station's life support systems working in the walls. And Professor Valithan's crystalline form flickered with colors that indicated shock and disbelief, and something that might have been the beginning of fear. "That is impossible," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And yet," Elena replied calmly, "here I stand." The silence stretched on, and no one in that room would ever forget the moment when everything they thought they knew about life and the universe was proven wrong by a single calm voice from a species they had never heard of before that day. The silence lasted only a few seconds before it shattered into absolute chaos, with hundreds of voices crying out in dozens of languages, translators struggling to keep up with the flood of questions and denials and expressions of disbelief that filled the great lecture hall like a wave crashing against rocks. "Impossible!" screamed the delegate from the Volanthi homeworld, their hollow bones shaking with fear at what they had just heard. "This must be a translation error," shouted another scientist, a being made of living gas who swirled anxiously in their containment field. "Check her measurements. Our instruments must be faulty," demanded a third voice from somewhere in the middle of the crowd. Professor Valithan raised his crystalline arms, trying to restore order to his lecture hall, his body flickering with agitated colors as he struggled to process what this strange compact creature had just claimed. Please, everyone calm down," he called out, though his own voice betrayed his uncertainty. "I am sure there has been some mistake, some error in translation or measurement that we can easily correct." He turned to Elena with what he hoped was a kind and patient expression, the sort of look one might give to a child who has said something foolish but does not yet understand. "Why, my dear Dr. Vasquez," he said, "I understand that your species is new to interstellar contact, and perhaps your measurement systems are not yet calibrated to galactic standards. But I assure you that what you are claiming is simply not possible according to all known science. Elena did not seem bothered by his tone, did not seem offended by the implication that her people did not understand basic measurement. And instead she simply nodded calmly and pulled a small device from her pocket. "I expected this reaction," she said, "which is why I brought verified data from 17 independent survey probes that your own crystalline hegemony sent to our solar system over the past 50 years. She pressed a button on her device, and the holographic display behind Professor Velethum flickered and changed, now showing detailed scans of a blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star, with numbers and measurements scrolling alongside the beautiful image Earth, Elena said, pointing to the planet, third planet from our sun, diameter of 12,742 kilometers, mass of 5.97 times 10 to the 24th kilograms. She paused and looked directly at Professor Velethum, and surface gravity of 9.81 meters per second squared, which converts to exactly 1.0 standard galactic gravity units. The numbers hung in the air, undeniable and irrefutable, verified by hegemony technology that no one in the room could dismiss as faulty or primitive. These readings were confirmed by Probe 7 in the year you call 3847, Elena continued, and again by Probes 12 through 17 over the following decades, each one measuring the same result. Each one sending back data that your own scientists apparently chose to ignore because it did not fit their theories. Professor Velethum stared at the numbers, his crystalline mind racing to find some explanation, some error, some way to make this impossible truth go away. But the data was clear and the verification was absolute. "This cannot be," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. The chaos in the room grew worse as delegates began pulling up their own records, checking their own archives, confirming with horror that yes, the survey probes had indeed returned this data from the human homeworld, and yes, their scientists had indeed dismissed it as equipment malfunction rather than accept what it implied. "How do you stand?" Someone shouted from the crowd, their voice high with something between fear and fascination. "How do you move?" Another demanded, "How do you breathe under such weight?" A third voice asked, and soon the questions were coming so fast that the translators could barely keep up. Elena waited patiently for the noise to die down, standing with a calm confidence that seemed almost impossible given the chaos around her. And when she finally spoke again, her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "We do not just stand. We run," she said. "We do not just move. We jump and climb and swim and dance. We do not just breathe. We sing and shout and laugh until our lungs ache with joy." She smiled, and there was something in that smile that made several delegates lean back in their seats instinctively, recognizing without understanding that they were looking at something new, something different, something that their galaxy had never seen before. On Earth, we have competitions where humans run for over 42 kilometers without stopping, Elena continued. "We call them marathons, and thousands of humans complete them every year just for fun." A delegate from a low-gravity world fainted at these words, their delicate body unable to process the horror of what they were hearing. And medical drones rushed to assist them while Elena continued speaking. "We climb mountains that reach nearly 9 kilometers into the sky," she said. "We dive into oceans that go 11 kilometers deep. We cross deserts that would kill most species in hours. And we do these things not because we must, but because we choose to." Professor Velethum had stopped trying to restore order, stopped trying to find explanations. And now he simply listened with growing amazement as this impossible creature described an impossible world. "And perhaps most strangely to you," Elena said, her smile growing slightly wider, "we jump from aircraft at heights of 4 kilometers or more, falling toward the ground at terminal velocity. Just for the thrill of it, we call this skydiving. And millions of humans do it every year." "You fall," Professor Velethum repeated slowly, as if he could not believe the words he was saying. From the sky, deliberately, for entertainment? Yes, Professor, Elena confirmed. Where we come from. Gravity is not the enemy that you imagine it to be. It is simply part of our world, part of who we are. And we learned long ago not to fear it, but to use it. She stepped closer to the professor, looking up at his towering crystalline form without any sign of intimidation. Your gravity made you fragile, she said softly. Our gravity made us strong, and now here we both are, meeting for the first time. And I think you are beginning to understand that the universe is much more strange and wonderful than your theories ever allowed. Professor Velethan looked down at this small, dense creature, this impossible being from an impossible world. And for the first time in his 300 years of life, he had absolutely no idea what to say. The lecture hall remained in chaos around them. Delegates arguing and fainting and demanding explanations. But at the center of it all stood a human woman, calm and patient and utterly unafraid, waiting for the galaxy to catch up to a truth that her species had always known. The universe did not care about theories or limits, or what should be possible. It simply was, and humanity had evolved to survive it all. 3 days after the lecture that shook the foundations of galactic science, Elena Vasquez walked calmly into the medical bay of Station Luminar 9, where a team of the galaxy's most distinguished physicians waited to examine the impossible creature that had turned their understanding of biology upside down. The Galactic Science Council had demanded a full assessment of human biology, needing to understand how such a species could exist. And Elena had agreed without hesitation because she understood that this examination was not just about her, but about humanity's introduction to the wider galactic community. Dr. Vasquez, thank you for agreeing to this procedure, said the lead physician, a Torvali named Physician Prime Kethis, whose silver skin rippled with nervous anticipation. I assure you we will be gentle and respectful throughout. Elena smiled at the concern in his voice, appreciating the kindness, even as she found it slightly amusing. Do not worry, Physician Kethis, she said. I have had many medical examinations in my life, and I am not easily hurt. Please do whatever tests you need to do. The medical team exchanged uncertain glances at her casual attitude, still not quite believing that any creature could be so calm about being examined by alien physicians in an unfamiliar environment. But they proceeded with their work, beginning with simple external scans before moving to more detailed analysis. Beginning skeletal scan now, announced one of the assistants, a small furry being whose species name Elena could not pronounce. The holographic display lit up with an image of Elena's skeleton, and immediately the room fell silent with shock. By the great void, Kethis whispered, staring at the image with all 4 of his eyes. What am I looking at? Elena's bones were nothing like what the physicians expected. Nothing like the hollow or porous structures that most galactic species possessed. Instead, they were dense solid masses of calcium and mineral compounds, reinforced by years of gravitational stress into something that looked more like structural supports for a building than parts of a living body. Human bones are solid, Elena explained calmly while they stared. They are made of a material we call bone tissue, and they grow stronger throughout our lives as we use them, especially when we exercise or carry heavy weights. Solid, Kethis repeated, as if the word itself was hard to believe. Completely solid, with no cavities for weight reduction. No hollow spaces for efficiency. We do not need weight reduction, Elena said with a slight shrug. Our muscles are strong enough to move our bodies, even with solid bones. And the solid structure means our bones rarely break, even under significant impact. The assistant who had begun the scan had to leave the room for a moment, overwhelmed by what they were seeing, and 2 others took their place as the examination continued. Beginning cardiovascular scan, another physician announced. and the display changed to show Elena's heart and blood vessels, if the skeleton had shocked them. The cardiovascular system left them speechless. Elena's heart was a powerful muscular organ, beating with a steady rhythm that pushed blood through her body with remarkable force. And the blood vessels themselves were wrapped in muscular tissue that helped maintain pressure, even against the constant pull of gravity. This heart, Cephas said slowly. It is designed to pump fluid upward against resistance. It is built like a pressure system, like something you would find in industrial machinery. Human hearts beat about 100,000 times every single day, Elena told them. And they do this for 80 or 90 years without stopping. Sometimes longer if the human takes good care of themselves. 100,000 times daily, Cephas repeated. For 90 years, without maintenance or replacement. We do require maintenance, Elena admitted. We call it eating healthy food and exercising regularly, but yes, the same heart lasts an entire lifetime for most humans. The examination continued for hours, each new discovery bringing fresh amazement and horror to the medical team. They found muscles wrapped in dense fibers designed for constant load-bearing, capable of generating force that would tear apart the bodies of most galactic species. They found a digestive system that could process almost any organic matter, breaking down foods that would poison other creatures and extracting nutrients with brutal efficiency. They found a respiratory system that could function in a wide range of atmospheric conditions, from thin mountain air to thick humid jungles, adapting on the fly to whatever environment the human found themselves in. They found skin that could heal itself from cuts and burns and bruises, regrowing damaged tissue without medical intervention, scarring over wounds that would be fatal to more delicate species, and they found a brain that processed information with remarkable speed, capable of learning new languages and skills and adapting to situations that it had never encountered before. This is not a body, Cephas finally said after 7 hours of examination, his voice filled with something between awe and terror. This is a survival machine. This is something built by evolution to endure anything the universe can throw at it. Elena nodded, understanding his perspective, even if she did not share his fear. Humans evolved on a world that tried very hard to kill us, she explained. We had predators that could outrun us and overpower us. We had diseases that killed millions. We had ice ages that covered our world in frozen death. We had famines and floods and fires and earthquakes. She paused, looking at the frightened faces around her. And we survived all of it, she continued. Not by being the fastest or the strongest or the most deadly, but by being the most stubborn, the most adaptable, the most absolutely unwilling to die. Cephas leaned closer, fascinated despite his fear. How did you hunt? He asked. You say you were not the fastest or strongest, so how did your ancestors catch prey? Elena smiled, and something in that smile made every physician in the room feel a chill run through their bodies. We are persistence predators, she said. We would pick a target and follow it, not running fast but moving steadily, never stopping to rest, tracking our prey by its footprints and its scent and the signs it left behind. And then, Cephas prompted, and then we would keep following, Elena said. For hours, for an entire day sometimes. Never letting the prey rest, never letting it escape. Until finally, the animal was so exhausted from running away that it simply collapsed. And then we would catch it. The room was absolutely silent. You chased animals until they died from exhaustion? One of the assistants asked in horror. Yes, Elena confirmed. We did not need to be faster than our prey. We just needed to be more patient, and humans are very, very patient when we want something. Cephas stepped back from his patient, looking at this small, dense creature with new understanding and new terror. You do not overpower your prey, he said slowly. You do not outrun it. You simply refuse to stop. You simply keep coming until resistance becomes impossible. Yes, Elena said again. And her smile had not changed. That is exactly what we do. And we have been doing it for millions of years. The examination was declared complete shortly after this conversation, and the medical team filed their report with the Galactic Science Council, a document that would change how every species in the galaxy thought about the small blue planet called Earth, and the stubborn, impossible creatures that called it home. Humans were not supposed to exist, but they did, and now the galaxy would have to learn to live with that terrifying and wonderful truth. News of the human revelation spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass, traveling through communication networks at faster than light speeds, reaching every inhabited world and station within hours of Dr. Vasquez's lecture. And everywhere it went, it left chaos and wonder and fear in its wake on the crystalline homeworld of Velis Prime. Emergency sessions of the Science Academy continued for 16 days straight as GMAs. Researchers struggled to understand how their fundamental theories about life had been so completely wrong. We must recalculate everything, declared High Scientist Torval, her crystalline body flickering with exhausted colors. Every model we have built, every prediction we have made, every world we have dismissed as uninhabitable, all of it must be reviewed in light of this new information. And so the recalculations began, spreading outward from Velis Prime to every research institution in known space planets that had been written off as death worlds were suddenly candidates for complex life. Rocky, heavy worlds with crushing gravity that scientists had ignored for centuries because everyone knew that nothing could survive there. How many species might we have missed? One researcher asked during a conference call that included scientists from 30 different worlds. How many civilizations might be out there right now, living on planets we never bothered to look at because our theories told us life there was impossible? No one had an answer, but the implications were staggering. The habitable zone calculations that had guided exploration for thousands of years were being rewritten overnight, expanding dramatically to include conditions that would have been considered lethal just weeks before. But beneath all of this scientific excitement, something else was growing, something darker and more afraid in the secure chambers of the Galactic Defense Council. Military analysts from a dozen species gathered to discuss the strategic implications of humanity's existence. And the mood in that room was very different from the academic excitement elsewhere. General Vorthok of the Tovali Defense Force stood before a holographic display showing detailed scans of human biology. The same scans that the medical team had taken during Elena's examination. And his silver face was grim as he began his presentation. "Let me be direct with you all," he said. "We are facing a situation that our military doctrines never anticipated. I believe we need to understand exactly what we are dealing with before we proceed with any first contact protocols." He activated the display and Elena's skeleton appeared. Dense and solid and raw by galactic standards, human bones are approximately 4 times denser than the galactic average, Vorthok explained. This means they can survive impacts that would shatter our soldiers, falls that would kill our best troops, and physical stress that would cripple our strongest species. He changed the display to show muscular structure. Human muscles contain millions of fibers designed for constant operation under high gravity, he continued. Conservative estimates suggest that on average, human could lift and carry weights that would require mechanical assistance for most of our species. And their soldiers and athletes are significantly stronger than average. Murmurs of concern spread through the room as the implications became clear. Their reflexes are faster than ours, Vorthok continued. Their endurance is higher than ours. Their ability to recover from injury is better than ours. And they evolved on a world that actively tried to kill them every single day of their existence. He paused and looked around the room at the worried faces of his colleagues. "They are living siege engines," he said bluntly. "Every single one of them. Built by millions of years of evolutionary pressure to survive conditions that would exterminate our populations." Ambassador Catharus of the Volanti Collective raised a trembling hand, her hollow bones shaking with fear. "What is their temperament?" she asked. "Are they aggressive? Are they warlike? Will they try to conquer us?" Vorthik hesitated, and when he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful rather than alarmed. "That is the complicated part," he admitted. "Our intelligence gathering suggests that humans are deeply contradictory creatures." He changed the display to show historical records from Earth. Images and videos that human broadcasts had sent into space over the centuries. "They wage war amongst themselves constantly," he said, showing images of human conflicts that made several delegates gasp with horror. "Their history is filled with violence and conquest, and destruction on scales that are hard for us to imagine." But then he changed the images again, showing something very different. "And yet they also create art of extraordinary beauty," he said, displaying paintings and sculptures and music that made the room fall silent with wonder. "They form emotional bonds with other species, keeping animals as companions and treating them as family members, sometimes even keeping predators in their homes as beloved pets." The display changed again to show humans helping each other, rescuing strangers from disasters, donating resources to those in need, crying at stories that were not even real. "They will die for complete strangers," Vorthik said quietly. "They will sacrifice their own comfort and safety to help beings they have never met. They weep for fictional characters in their stories, and they feel genuine distress when they see others suffering." He turned to face the council directly. "They are chaotic and unpredictable and capable of terrible violence," he concluded. "But they are also capable of incredible kindness and compassion and self-sacrifice. They are dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. But they are not evil. They are simply human." The room sat in stunned silence as everyone tried to process this contradictory information. "How do we proceed?" asked Strategic Commander Yenis of the Hegemony Forces. "Do we treat them as threats, as allies, as something else entirely?" "I recommend caution," Vorthik replied. "We should not provoke them, we should not threaten them. But we should also not underestimate them or assume we understand them based on our own experiences." He took a deep breath. "They survived a world that should have killed them," he said. "They built civilizations while fighting gravity and predators and disease in each other. And now they have reached the stars. Whatever we do next, we must do it carefully. Because these are not creatures who give up easily. These are not creatures who accept defeat. These are creatures who look at impossible odds and simply refuse to stop trying." The meeting continued for many more hours, with debates and arguments, and proposals that would shape galactic policy toward humanity for years to come. But one thing was clear to everyone. In that room, by the time the meeting ended, the galaxy had changed forever, and nothing would ever be the same again somewhere in the vastness of space. On a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, 7 billion humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that they had become the most talked about and feared and wondered about species in the known universe. They were just living their lives, doing what humans had always done, surviving and adapting and refusing to give up, never knowing that to the rest of the galaxy, they were something between a miracle and a nightmare, and perhaps that was the most human thing of all. 6 weeks had passed since the lecture that changed everything. 6 weeks of chaos and recalculation and fear and wonder. And now Professor Valathan stood alone in his private study on Station Luminar 9, staring at a communication request that blinked patiently on his screen. It was from Dr. Elena Vasquez, asking if he would be willing to meet with her one final time before she departed for Earth. The professor, who had once declared with such confidence that life could not exist at one standard gravity, now felt small and uncertain. His 300 years of research proven wrong by a single calm voice from the back of a lecture hall. And he was not sure he wanted to face that voice again, but curiosity won over pride, as it always did for true scientists, and he accepted the request. Elena arrived at his study precisely on time, moving through the door with that strange fluid grace that still unsettled him, her dense body somehow making the general gravity of the station feel different just by existing within it. "Professor Velithin," she said with a warm smile. "Thank you for agreeing to see me, Dr. Vasquez," he replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I must admit, I was surprised by your request. After everything that has happened, I would have understood if you never wanted to speak with me again." Elena laughed softly as she sat down, and even that simple sound carried a weight and depth that reminded him she was not like any being he had ever known. "Why would I be angry with you?" she asked. "You were wrong about something, and then you learned the truth. That is what scientists do. That is what learning looks like." Velithin felt something shift inside his crystalline chest, a loosening of tension he had not realized he was carrying. "You are very forgiving," he said quietly. "I am human," Elena replied. "We have had a lot of practice at forgiving each other. We have to. Otherwise, we would never have survived long enough to reach the stars." They sat in silence for a moment, two beings from impossibly different worlds, trying to understand each other across a gulf of biology and experience that should have been unbridgeable. "I have a question," Velithin finally said. "If you would be willing to answer it." "Of course," Elena replied. The professor leaned forward, his crystalline eyes catching the light as he spoke. "I have spent the past 6 weeks studying everything I can find about your world and your species," he said. "I have read your histories and watched your broadcasts and analyzed your biology, and I still do not understand something fundamental." "What is that?" Elena asked. "Your world should have killed you," Velithin said bluntly. "Not just the gravity, though that alone should have been enough, but everything else as well. The temperature extremes, the tectonic instability, the atmospheric electrical storms, the predators, the diseases, the asteroid impacts, the ice ages, the volcanic winters." He shook his head, colors rippling through his crystalline form. "Every force of nature on your planet seems designed to destroy complex life," he continued. "And yet you not only survived, you thrived. You became intelligent. You built civilizations. You reached space. And I need to understand what is the secret? What allowed your species to persist when everything was against you?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering the question carefully. She thought about her ancestors, the early humans who had faced down predators with nothing but pointed sticks and determination. She thought about the survivors of ice ages and famines and plagues, the ones who refused to die even when death seemed certain. She thought about the explorers and inventors and dreamers who had pushed humanity forward one stubborn step at a time, never accepting limits, never giving up. "Professor," she said finally, "you look at one standard gravity and see a death sentence. We look at it and see home." Velithin tilted his head, confused by this answer. "Your planet's dangers are not obstacles to us," Elena continued. "They are the forge that made us what we are. Every challenge we faced, every enemy we fought, every disaster we survived, all of it shaped us. All of it made us stronger." She stood up, and even in the gentle gravity of the station, she moved with the grounded certainty of a creature born to fight weight every moment of its existence. A creature that had never known what it felt like to float or drift or be carried by the world around it. "You asked how we survived," she said, looking down at the professor with eyes that held millions of years of evolutionary pressure behind them. "The answer is simple. We adapted, we endured. We refused to give up." She began to pace slowly, her words carrying the weight of her entire species. When the world broke our bones, we learned to heal and come back stronger. When predators hunted us, we learned to hunt them back. When the cold came, we wrapped ourselves in the skins of animals and built fires to push back the darkness. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. When diseases killed us by the millions, we learned medicine. When famine starved us, we learned agriculture. When floods drowned us, we learned to build boats. When our world threw everything it had at us, we looked back at it and said one word. She stopped pacing and faced Velithan directly. No, the word hung in the air between them. That is what humans do. Professor, we take everything the universe throws at us and we refuse to stop. Not because we are special, not because we are chosen, not because we are better than other species. She smiled, and there was warmth in it, and pride, and something fierce and untamable. We survive because giving up is simply not in our biology. It is not something we know how to do. When we are knocked down, we get back up. When we fail, we try again. When we die, we make sure our children carry on in our place. Velithan stared at her, his crystalline mind struggling to comprehend a species that had turned pure stubbornness into an evolutionary advantage. Your gravity did not crush you, he said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. It taught you to stand. Your predators did not eat you. They taught you to fight. Your disasters did not destroy you. They taught you to rebuild. Yes, Elena confirmed. And now here we are, a species born from struggle and shaped by adversity, ready to take our place among the stars. The professor was silent for a long moment, processing everything he had heard, everything he had learned, everything he had been wrong about. And what happens now? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now that you have reached space, now that you have joined the galactic community, what will your species do? Elena's smile grew wider, and there was something in it that was both terrifying and beautiful. The smile of a predator who had learned to be kind. The smile of a survivor who had never known how to quit. Now, Professor, we find out what else we can survive. She extended her hand, a human gesture of friendship that Velithan had learned about during his research. And after a moment of hesitation, he reached out with his own crystalline appendage to accept it. The touch was strange, her warm, dense flesh against his cool mineral surface. But somehow it felt right. Two impossible beings from impossible worlds, choosing to face the future together. The galaxy will never be the same, Velithan said quietly. No, Elena agreed. It will be better, because now it has us, and we do not give up on things we care about. She released his hand and walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold to look back one final time. Thank you for the conversation, Professor, and for being willing to learn. That takes courage, and courage is something humans respect very much. Then she was gone, walking calmly through the corridors of the station, heading back to her ship, heading home to a world that had tried to kill her species for millions of years, and Phalid Velithan stood alone in his study for a long time after she left, thinking about everything he had learned, everything he had been wrong about, everything that was about to change. The universe had hard limits. He had once believed walls that life could not climb, barriers that biology could not break, but humans had shown him that limits were just challenges waiting to be overcome, and barriers were just opportunities to prove how strong you really were. The galaxy would never be the same, and as strange as it was to admit, Velithan found himself looking forward to seeing what these impossible, stubborn, wonderful creatures would do next. Because if there was one thing he had learned about humans, it was this: they never, ever stopped trying, and that, perhaps, was the most terrifying and beautiful thing of all.